Hello and welcome to Matt's Automotive Channel. If you have been following this build with the 98 Mustang Cobra, we have this engine that was in serious need of repair and we've had to completely tear this down and rebuild it. You'll have also noticed that it's been a while since our last video, and the reason for that is that we've been plagued with a number of issues. We had some family health issues to deal with. We had a winter storm come through that was pretty damaging, caused some house damage. We lost power for a while. So anyway, this project has just kind of been pushed to the side until we can get these things dealt with, and hopefully things are kind of normalizing. So hopefully we can get back to this thing and just stay on it and get this job done. My goal for this video is to get to this motor back into this car. However, this is going to be a little challenging simply because we have long tube headers, and that adds kind of another level of difficulty to getting the motor back in. I am hoping that I can just bolt up the headers and then just kind of slide it in under the transmission, raise the transmission as much as possible and get it in there. I'm kind of thinking that's not going to happen. So the next option would be to remove the transmission from the car and then bolt it up to the motor and then kind of just insert the whole thing from above into the car, and hopefully that'll work. I don't know if it will. This does not have the standard K-member. It's got a tubular K-member, and maybe that'll free up enough room so it's not an issue. But I'm gonna give it a try. If it does not work, then of course the next option, which I know will work, but it's also the most work, and that is to remove both the transmission, the K-member, and then bolt the engine to everything outside and then bring it up underneath the car. I'm really hoping that we don't have to do that, but I'm not sure. I haven't really seen any videos on anybody addressing this sort of issue with the long tubes. You can find some information on forums and you get different answers depending on the type of car and the headers that were used. I guess the Cook's headers, if you have those, are a little more easy and a little more room, and I've heard of people being able to actually remove the transmission without removing the headers first. So anyway, I don't know with this particular setup what it's going to be like, but anyway, follow along and learn with me, and we'll see what will work to get this motor back into the car. So the next order of business is to get the engine off the engine stand, so we can get back here and put on the new flywheel and clutch. And also, these headers are a bit rusty and they need some cleaning. I have some evaporust that have worked very well in the past. Of course, I've always soaked the items because they were much smaller. However, with this, I'm trying a little different technique where I'm saturating some shop towels, laying them over the headers, and then so the evaporust doesn't evaporate, I'm putting some cling wrap over it. And I did that very thing over here on this side, and you can see I cleaned it up quite well. So I think what I'm going to do is just saturate a bunch of these and cover them all up and let them sit overnight, and hopefully they'll all clean up just as well as this. And once the evaporust attacks this rust, it rubs off pretty easy. So anyway, I'll give that a shot and hopefully they'll clean these up much better. I'd hate to put something this ugly on a motor that looks this nice. The other thing that we need to do is get the clutch fork off there and take a look at the pivot ball and make sure that that's not worn. If so, we'll have to replace that, and also get the new throwout bearing that came with our clutch kit. For this first attempt of trying to get the motor in, I'm going to leave the fuel rail out right now. I still have the injectors that I've cleaned up that I still need to put back in. I got some new O-rings for that. I'm also going to leave the intake off, just simply because it'll make it a little easier. It's easy to use these bolts here where the alternator goes, and then also these bell housing bolt holes up here that I can just hook the crane to. And then also, if I can squeeze it in there, it gives me good access to those two top bell housing bolts, which will make it much simpler. Again, I don't think this is going to work, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. All right, as you can see, the evaporust using the shop rags worked pretty well at cleaning this up. It took very minimal rubbing to get most of the rust off. Some of the stuff that's more deeply pitted, you can tell that did not come off, but anyway, much better. Then I hit both of these with some brake clean to get all the oil and residue off, and now I'm hitting them with some high heat paint. So anyway, it looks like they're cleaning up pretty well. Next order of business here is to remove these lines here with these AN fittings that went to the oil cooler housing. And I was under the impression that if I followed these lines back, that it would go to a radiator in front of the car here. That's not the case. If you follow them, all it does is go to an external oil filter housing. So anyway, it looks like they just wanted to be able to use a larger oil filter. That was kind of the whole purpose of the thing. It wasn't necessarily for additional cooling. So anyway, I'm just gonna go ahead and pull this oil filter, and then we'll take the bracket off and remove the lines and everything and just get them out of here. Okay, it looks as if though there's only one bolt holding this on. I thought I was gonna have to pull the oil filter off first, but as you can see, looks like it's just pivoting on that one bolt right there. So I just need to take that off and this whole thing should just drop out. Looks like I can just do this by hand. It's so loose. Unbelievable. There we go. And it's out. Okay guys, this is it. This is the whole thing. And yeah, it's definitely a larger oil filter if we compare the new one to the old one. Pretty good size difference there. And relocating, I'm sure make it maybe a little easier to do oil changes as well. But I don't really believe that's going to provide any more cooling. So it looks more like just a convenience thing and an opportunity to use a larger filter. Also, with that filter out of there, look up here, and it was basically just the one bolt holding everything in. This here is the fog light, and so anyway, I'm gonna have to replace these bolts. It's just amazing how people take shortcuts with this sort of work and don't put things back the way they're supposed to be. So, you know, I mean, we're hanging an additional thing on this bracket, pulling out some bolts that were holding lesser stuff in, and it's just unbelievable. And when I tried to turn this to get the oil filter off, all it was doing was kind of just bending the bracket because it really wasn't secure. So even changing the oil with this particular setup probably would have wrecked the bracket. I just don't understand why people do this sort of thing. For the time being, I just got that one bolt back in there, and obviously there's two more that are supposed to be holding this bracket in place. So I'll get some more bolts and then button this back up the way it's supposed to be. Next order of business is to get this clutch cable off so we can pull the clutch fork and replace that throwout bearing. And we'll also take a look under that pivot ball there and see what kind of shape that's in. All right, let's get, oh, that's right, no spring on it. So this is super easy. Okay. And then to release the clutch fork, I think all we need to do is pull back on this. I'm gonna have to pry it. Oh no, we got it. I think. There we go. There it pull it right out. Okay, now with the clutch fork out, let's wipe the grease off this pivot ball here and see what kind of wear it's got. Now there's some definite wear there. Not a whole lot, but there is, I can definitely feel that it's gouged in. So I'll probably get a new one and we'll just go ahead and replace that. It'll never be easier than now. And this input shaft actually feels pretty good. End play, I can't really detect any. It spins nice and easy. And the column that the clutch fork rides on here seems to be nice and smooth, no gouging or anything. So I think we're in good shape. This should be fairly straightforward. And to be honest, this throwout bearing is not bad. I still feel resistance there. It doesn't make any noise. It's smooth. But we did get a new one with the clutch kit, so we're just going to go ahead and replace it anyway. And let's see, on the back side of the fork here, where the pivot ball rides, it feels pretty good actually. So I don't think we'll replace any components here other than the throwout bearing and the pivot ball. Okay, so I just went to Riley's and got some more header studs. They come in sets of 10, so I ended up having to get 2 of them. And also a new pivot ball for the clutch fork. Now I don't know if we're going to have to trim some of these. These Some of these may end up protruding too far and actually go right into the side of the header there, so we'll have to kind of test fit this. Alright, on this header, for the life of me, I don't know how this bolt ever got in here. I cannot remove it, and I'd prefer to use the studs. Doesn't matter how I move this. I think I'd have to actually bend the bolt to get it out of here. Unless they actually put this bolt in and then welded this flange on, which I kind of doubt. This is crazy. I'll probably end up just having to cut this off. We got some bolt cutters, so I'm just going to cut this thing off. There we go. That's out. Okay, I'm just going to test fit these. I'm not going to pull the tape off yet here, put a gasket on. I just kind of want to know how these are going to fit and if I'm going to have to shorten these studs. And I do the same here for the other side too. I hear some people have problems with it interfering with the dipstick tube. Hopefully that's not the case because I just bought an OEM dipstick tube. And some people say you have to buy an aftermarket flexible one. So hopefully that's not the case. It looks to me like we can use the studs as they are, at least on the right side of the motor. There's one down here. It's a little tricky to get into, but there's definitely enough room to clear everything, so I can get that nut on there. So let's flip it over and check the other side with the dipstick tube. All right, let's try on the other side and see how it's going to fit. Okay, I see what they're talking about with it hitting the oil tube. You can see here it's just barely touching, but it's touching. So we'll have to unbolt this and then loosen it a little bit. And I think just make this bend a little sharper so we'll have it come more straight up and then over. It won't need to be tweaked much. In fact, it looks as if though once this header's on, this tube could reside kind of on the outside of this. So it might just be a matter of loosening this, putting the header on, and then tightening this back up. I think it's gonna work just fine. Actually, I was able to just kind of wedge the screwdriver in here and then pry a little bit. You can see that it can move a bit. And that was enough to get it on. So tight fit, but it looks like it's gonna work just fine. Another thing that I really like about the studs over the bolts are these nuts. They're not a nylock type because obviously the nylon would just melt, but the threads, they get a little tighter there at the end and make a lot of resistance when screwing this on. So the reason they do that is to prevent these nuts from backing off with all the vibration. So it kind of locks on there really nice, and you can tell when you get it threaded on there, it's kind of tough to turn, but it's supposed to be, just so they don't vibrate and come loose. All right, I did find one problem with the studs, and if you look here on the bottom side, there's this guy right here that does actually hit the tube. So we're gonna have to shave off some of the threads here, make it short, and then it should work just fine. But it is a little tight there, and that will prevent it from actually going on all the way. Boy, it's really, even with the engine out of the car, this is really tough. I just went ahead and pulled the pivot ball. Every time I pull an old piece out and put a new one in, I like to compare the two to make sure that they're the same. These look to be absolutely identical, so this should be no problem. I'll just go ahead and install this new one. Looks like this stud here is going to be the problem. So after measuring the header flange and the nut that has to go on, looks like everything should work if I measure out about 1 inch here. And I'll just mark it. And then we'll just chop this off. And that should give us adequate room to get the header on there, and then also enough room to get the nut spun on. So let's go ahead and cut that off. To get a clean cut, I'm just going to use a Dremel here and then cut out 1 inch. There we go. To get rid of the burrs and make it so the nut will screw on real easy, I got this device here, which kind of just rounds off the edges or bevels the edges. And you can see you got a nice taper there now. So the nut should thread on there no problem. All right, let's just test it first before we put the header on, just to see if it does twist on without any catches, and it does, no problem. And I did try to keep this as long as possible because the part of the bolt where it actually catches the threads here and adds the additional resistance to keep the nut from backing off is right here on the edge. So you want as much length here as possible for that reason alone. I got the header loosely fit on there again, so let's just check our clearance. And as you can see there, no problem, clears the header. All right, now that we know we got the proper clearances and everything's gonna fit, let's go ahead and bolt up our header. One problem I see here with this type of head gasket is some interference, at least putting it on with the tubes. I think we're going to temporarily remove the tube and this will go on behind it. If you have the OEM gaskets, I believe they're sectioned off 2 parts for each side and it would not be an issue. However, I don't know what brand gasket this is, but regardless, being a single piece, this tube is temporarily going to be in the way. So let's just go ahead and pull this off, bolt the header on, and then reinstall the tube. Now let's reinstall the dipstick tube and then we'll go ahead and bolt up the header. And this will get torqued down to 89 inch-pounds. Now, some of these nuts, you're not going to be able to get a torque wrench onto. So, what I like to do is with the torque, do the ones you can do first with the torque wrench, and then you kind of get an idea of how much pressure, get a feel for what that 15 pound-feet is like, and then go to something else like this, and make sure you're obviously applying pressure at the same distance, and then just kind of apply that same pressure until you get the feel, because there's just no way to get a torque wrench into some of these bottom bolts there. All right, now let's just do the same thing for the other side. Okay, I looked up the specs for these exhaust manifold header bolts or nuts, and they get torqued down to 18 pound-feet. And of course, I'm not going to be able to get the torque wrench onto all of these. So the technique I like to use is go maybe 1 or 2 pound-feet less than the spec. So I got this actually set for 17 pound-feet. And then I like to just turn it until I get there. And then this is really the only tool that I can get access to all the bolts. So what I do now is put this on here and see how much force it takes to actually move it just ever so slightly. And that way I'm not going to go over the 18 pound-feet. And it gives me a feel for how much force I need to apply to this and use that same feel for all the remainder of the bolts. And then I'll be pretty darn close. If not, it's not going to be exact, but it's close. There we go, I get a little bit. So I got a good feel for how much I have to tug on this thing to move it. So I'm just going to do that with the remainder of the bolts now. Now this wrench here is only about 6 inches long, so it's pretty much taking all my strength to get to the point where I can turn it above 17 pound-feet. So I doubt very much I'm going to ever be able to over-tighten the bolts using this. So basically, if you have something like this, get it pretty much as snug as you can, and you should be pretty good, pretty close. Now, one thing I like to do is once I have them all pretty tight, is to go over them one more time, because oftentimes when you start to torque down the other bolts, the other one gets a little looser as that gasket gets compressed. So I always recommend going over these twice just to make sure. There, you see I still have that set for 17 and I turned just ever so slightly. So I'm going to go back over with the other wrench and just kind of give them one more tug. Okay guys, you can see here, just visually inspecting this, that's why it's going to be much more difficult to get this motor back in. These long tubes really do protrude out the back. You know, normally you can just kind of drop the motor straight in and then move it a few inches that way and bolt everything together. But this is going to be definitely more challenging. Now, I think for the time being, I'm going to leave the clutch and flywheel off and transfer this over to the hoist and just see if I can raise that transmission up all the way and then kind of just shimmy this underneath. I'm kind of doubting it's going to work. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to have to pull the transmission out at the very least, and probably the K-member too. But I'm just really curious to see if we can get this in like this. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. Okay, got one little problem here. Before I go any further, I kind of want to get this exhaust flange stud taken care of. We have a missing one here. I was able to rummage through our pile of parts and then come up with this one. However, you can see the thread. See if I can get it focused in here. The thread's kind of messed up there on the end. And also, I believe the threads in here are messed up. And this will not thread in. So I got the tap and die set out, and I'm just going to go ahead and clean up these threads here. And in case you're wondering the size, I've got my thread checker here, and this threads in perfectly to the M12 by 1.75. So let's go ahead and clean this up. There we go. Okay, I can feel that. Cutting through, cleaning those up. All right, perfect. Now I'll get the tap and then clean up the flange just the same. Okay, I thought I'd just give this a try before cleaning this up, just by chance, some chance that this will still thread in here. And it does not want to thread in there at all. So let's clean this up. All right, that side should thread in there just fine now. So let's give it a shot and see how well it works. And bam, there we go. No problem. Now let's try to free this nut from this stud. It's being pretty stubborn. Right, let's hit it with some heat then. Sometimes there's no substitute for an impact. There we go. Okay, I just cleaned up the threads on the wire wheel. And now we can go ahead and put this in. Let's go ahead and move the engine over to the hoist. And I'm not going to put the flywheel or clutch or anything on at this point, just to keep it light as possible and see if we can maneuver it under the transmission and get it in. I don't have very good hopes for this. Let's give it a shot. For lifting points, I'm going to use on the back of the motor, this spot and this spot. For the front of the motor, I'm going to use these two bolts here that normally hold the alternator. Okay, what I'm going to try to do is use this load leveler here and get as much tilt on the motor as possible. So the headers are kind of pointed down. I'm going to put a jack underneath the transmission and move it up as high as possible. And we'll see if we can't wedge this thing in there. Okay, I got the jack under the transmission, and we'll try moving this up as much as possible. All right, just for info, I got the hood up as high as I could. I just tied a rope to the top there and then just went back over here and attached it to the latch in the trunk, and that's keeping that pretty good. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pull off the engine stand mount, and then we'll give it as much tilt as possible and see if we can kind of shoehorn it in there. We have the engine stand mount off. Let's see if we can get it in. Okay, we have a pretty good angle on it here. Let's just keep our fingers crossed, hope this works. All right, guys, I've gone about as far as I can go. As you can see, the headers are hitting the K-member there, and they're also hitting the bell housing back here. Let's see if I can get an angle there. If you can see that, it's hitting there, and then also over there. So, and yeah, it's just too tight. There's just no way to do this. So, next order of business is get the transmission out. Now, I told you the next thing I was going to try was just to get the transmission out and then hook the transmission up and see if we can shoehorn it in. But the same problem is going to exist. The headers are going to hit the K-member, even whether the transmission's on there or not. So it's just simply not going to work. So we got to pull both the K-member and the transmission, fully assemble it outside the car, and then wheel it under the car and lower the car onto the engine. That's how it's going to have to be done. All right, back to where we were. Think twice about getting long tubes. All right, guys, after I just said I may have made it sound like it's impossible to put it in with just the transmission and the motor and leave the K-member in. I've done it before with stock K-members and stock headers, and even then it was difficult. It can be done. It may not be impossible to do that, but it looks very, very challenging to me. And based on my past experience of having to do that with the extra weight of the transmission and the motor and having to get a high tilt on it, I just don't feel that it's the safest thing to do. Even though it's more work to pull a K-member, it's not that much more work. And I just feel that it's a safer way to go. So now that I said that, watch me get hurt. Okay, next thing I'm gonna do is pull off this midsection of the pipe here. I'm just gonna undo those flanges and then drop this. All right, I just went ahead and unbolted these two other flanges, and these rear pieces almost came down and hit me on the head. I was very lucky, and I wasn't expecting that. I guess I should have observed this a little closer, but right here we have a hanger that just came apart, and then that one isn't even hooked up at all. There's just no hanger at all. So, oh, by the way, it looks like we got a leaky rear pinion seal as well. And it's a good thing we're taking this apart. If you look here in the exhaust, looks like some little animals that have been in there and been making nests. So, golly, it'd probably be a good idea for me to take these pipes completely out and then just kind of purge them and make sure nothing's in them. Hopefully, the little animals didn't get beyond the cat. We'll see if we can even see the cat. I don't know, I'll have to kind of probe around in there and see. Hopefully those are cats and they haven't been gutted out. So anyway, good thing we're taking this apart. I don't know, oh my gosh, even that's bad. Holy smokes, we have stuff on both sides of the cats. That's just absolutely crazy. You can see on the other, that one looks much better, but holy smokes. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and continue pulling this off. Oh my God, that sounds terrible. Things are crunching all over the place here. Oh my God. This is crazy. I used a seat belt to tie this side up. Unbelievable. All right, I hear a lot of crunchy noises as I was pulling this off the car. There's a bunch of stuff in here. Let's see what comes out. Unbelievable. Oh my God. That's in the exhaust. Let's see what's in the other side. So I think what happened was, this is probably hanging low when they were moving the car, and it probably dug into the ground and just pulled up a bunch of dirt and debris. But, that's pretty excessive. Take a look at that, guys. That was in the exhaust, just the mid pipe. I'm gonna have to pull off the rear section as well, and probably give that a good shake down, because I'm sure there's some stuff in here. In fact, if we look in here, we see a rock right there. This one looks okay, but oh my God, this whole exhaust needs a going over. I was able to get the vacuum and get it in there fairly far and clean this all out. So I think I got all the debris. I was originally going to take these off completely, and you can see here this one hanger is broken, and this one's missing on this side. Go up here, it looks like it just tore through. And I did pull this rear hanger off completely using these pliers. And the thing is, without dropping some of the suspension, I think all you need to do is take this shock off and then drop this suspension a little more, and then you could probably pull this out. But as it is, with everything intact, you cannot remove this exhaust. No matter how you finagle it, it just will not go over the axle there. So what a wonderful engineering feat from Ford. Just great. They should have put some kind of flange right there where that weld is, and then it would come off with no problem. But anyway, I think I'm going to leave it like this for now anyway, unless when and if I ever get this car running and I hear some weird noises in the exhaust, I think I know what it's going to be. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and continue here. I'm going to go ahead and pull those bolts on the drive shaft and then remove this drive shaft, and then we can support the transmission, take off these the cross member bolts here, and also the ropes there where I have it hung, and we should just be able to drop this on down. I think I'm going to have to go up on top and remove some of the shifter linkage as well. So anyway, that's where we are at this point. Let's go ahead and pull the drive shaft. There we go. The drive shaft disconnected from the pinion flange, we can go ahead and pull it. However, it's likely to leak out of the back of the transmission here unless it's low on fluid. But it's really nice to have one of these transmission plug sets here. So once we pull the drive shaft out, we can immediately plug it with one of these guys. All right, let's go ahead and pull this. We have our plug ready. And I do have a spill pan underneath because inevitably it's going to leak a little bit. Okay. And it's not leaking. So either we're just at the right angle or the transmission's low on fluid. The way this car has been cared for in the past, probably low on fluid. Anyway, we'll put our plug in there anyway because we'll definitely be tilting it down as we pull the transmission out. Well, got it out, and there must be a little fluid in there. We had just a little bit of drippage right there. More interestingly, if we look at this rear pinion flange here, we see some leakage, pretty significant leakage. And of course, that's going to be out of the rear diff. So we're definitely going to have to take this apart and fix that. Well, it seems like every time I do something with this car, we just find a new problem. I know my hopes were on this video to get the motor in, but this video is getting a little long. So I'm going to promise you on the next one, I definitely will have that motor in that car. Promise, for sure. So anyway, I'm going to call it quits for this video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.